The topic today is uh, how to make closing sales prospects easy. Just to show you our agenda of topics today, I want to first start out with talking about a couple misconceptions that I believe are out there regarding closing in the world of sales. In order to be a better closer, I want to take a step back and start with and look at your sales pitch and talk about your sales pitch and how that can make closing easier. Want to talk a bit about qualifying the prospect. Qualifying the prospect is actually determining how good or bad a prospect is, and by doing a little bit more in that area will make closing easier, and I'll explain that. Then we'll talk about some closing techniques that you can use when you're trying to close prospects, and then we'll wrap up with talking about dealing with objections a little bit. When a lot of times when you're not able to close a prospect, it's because they're giving you an objection, right? It's not like you try to close them and they just disappear on you. Usually that interaction, when it's not successful, I mean, if you close them and you're successful, then there's really nothing for us to talk about here today. So what we're talking about here today is what to do when you're not able to close them, and usually that's what happens in that exact situation is they're going to give you an objection of some sort. So we'll talk a little bit about how to deal with particular objections when you're trying to close. So that's the agenda, and to kind of start out, I want to first, as I mentioned, talk about some misconceptions. And so the first one is I believe there's a lot of people out there that believe you're either born a salesperson or you're not. That there are just certain people that are designed to be salespeople, and if you're not one of those people, then you can't be successful. And so if you're out there and you're selling and you're not able to close, or you're not selling as well as you think you should, you might wonder if that's the case with you. Are you a salesperson? Were you born with what you needed to have in order to be a salesperson? Well, I personally don't believe that at all. I believe that selling is a skill. There are things you can learn in order to sell better, to sell more successfully, more effectively. And there are things you can learn to do, and not there. More importantly, there's things you can learn to stop doing or not do that can have sometimes in some ways a bigger impact. I will say that there are some people that are born with natural leadership qualities, that there's just something they naturally do, that people follow them and they take sort of a natural leading role in a lot of situations, and those people could end up being good salespeople by building a strong following and strong network. And in some sales positions, that does become an asset, and that is important, and that can help. That might be more helpful in the area of relationship selling, where you're building up a network of people that you work closely with, and you're building up a lot of relationships. I believe in most product, service, or technical sales, you don't have to have that necessarily. It's about really doing the right thing, so we'll talk about that. And I believe there's a misconception that you have to have a certain personality in order to close, and this is kind of tied to the last deal, which is you're born with the personality that you have. There's not a lot that you can do to change your personality. I mean, you can push yourself to be to get out of your comfort zone, or to push yourself to perform and operate in a certain way, but you are who you are, and I don't think you should try to be someone you aren't. But I don't think you have to have a certain personality in order to be a closer and in order to sell. So a lot of what we'll talk about here today can help you regardless of your personality. I mean, if you're so much of an introvert that you can't stand and you don't want to interact with human beings, then you probably shouldn't be in sales, and what we're talking about today won't help you. But if, let's say that you like selling and you're okay being with interacting with other people, but you're just not the loudest person in the room, well, there's certainly things you can do to sell more and to close better, and we'll talk about those here today. A lot of people associate closing with being pushy and aggressive. And in order to close more or to close better, you have to be pushier and aggressive. And maybe they're not that pushy, or you don't want to be pushy and aggressive. And I don't think that you have to. And to be more successful and to close more, I don't think you have to be pushy and aggressive. I think it's about being smarter. There's a lot of people that think that closing is the hardest step of the sales process. And I will agree that closing is probably the most important. I mean, you could do everything really well, and if you don't close, if you're not able to close, then it's all for nothing, right? So it is the most important. I actually believe that closing should be the easiest step of the sales process. And what I think a lot of people don't do the right things, so then closing is extremely hard. I do the right things in terms of before the close step. I believe if you do everything right leading up to the close, closing should actually be the easiest thing that you do in the sales process. So everything we're going to talk about here today supports why I believe those misconceptions, or those myths, you might want to look at them as, are not correct. So let's take a step back and start with your sales pitch. Your sales pitch really isn't your close. I believe your sales pitch is really what you say to get people interested, to get your foot in the door, to start the dialogue, and to kind of present what you have to offer. So for this, I want to this is a common slide that I present if you've attended any of our other webinars. But first, let's start out with looking at what common approaches, which I consider product pushing, product selling. So this sales pitch is sort of like this. This is the company I work for. This is what we sell. This is how it works. This is how much it costs. Do you guys need what we sell? That's a common sales pitch. Now we want to push you to have more of a consultative sales pitch, and this is going to help you to be a better closer, and I will clearly demonstrate that. But the consultative sales pitch is, instead of focusing on the company and the product, it's more on how you help the customer, the prospect, in terms of value, what problems you help to solve. Asking good questions, and I think good questions in your sales pitch are questions that determine if your prospect has pain problems that you can help to fix. Share some examples of how you've helped others. Share some ways that you're different. Communicate the return that you'd help to deliver. Include some impressive company facts. And instead of trying to see if they need what you sell or want what you sell, focus on closing to start the conversation, or close on moving the prospect to the next step. So let me go through and I want to share an example with you to get your hands around what I just went through really quickly. So first of all, I want to use an example, and I use this example a lot because it's something that I think we can all relate to, and I want to explain if I was selling a gym membership to you. Okay, and I want to go through the left side and the right side real quick. I use a gym membership because we all own a body, and either, if you're watching this, either you attend a gym or you don't attend a gym, and you might have some of the pain points that you can relate to. So bear with me if you've heard this example before, but if I were to sell you a gym membership and I did the product pitch, it might sound something like this. I'm with 24/7 gym. We have 30 treadmills, weights, spa, sauna, classes, yoga. It is $49 a month, month to month. Are you interested in signing up? That is the product pitch. Everything I talked about there is what is listed there. I talked about the company, the product, the treadmills, the pricing, and I wanted to see if you need what we sell. Now let me sell that same product, gym membership, on the right side. So instead of talking about the treadmills and the classes, I want to talk to you about how if you start attending our gym, you can transform your life. And I'm not really stretching that. If you're looking to lose weight and get healthier, we have a plan and have everything you need to do that. If you find yourself having trouble sleeping at night, if you don't feel like you're healthy, if you have medical expenses, we can help you to decrease your medical expenses, sleep better at night, decrease stress, find new friends, potentially find new romantic relationships. we can help you to, and so those are some of the pain points and benefits. Questions I could ask you are, how do you find yourself stressed from work and have trouble dealing with stress? How do you deal with stress? Do you find yourself being sick more often than you'd like? Do you find yourself going to the doctor, having medical bills, and do you have prescriptions that you think you might be able? Are you spending too much on prescription medication? So those are some questions I could ask you. Customer examples, I can tell you a story of someone that a middle-aged man who was 30 pounds overweight, single, depressed, stressed, going to the doctor on 10 different medications, started coming to the gym, lost 30 pounds, is in a brand new relationship, got a new job, got off of 8 of the 10 prescription medications, right? There's a story. Some ways that we're different is that you don't have to, let's say you get one free personal training session a week. I don't know. I'm just making that up. And no other gym does that. I want to be sure to tell you that. That's our differentiation. Return on investment, people that come and spend the monthly due with us, usually that pays for itself by them decreasing their medical expenses that they usually within the first whatever. I mean, they save tremendous amount on medical expenses, way beyond what they spend on their dues with the gym. Some facts about our gym is, we are 24 hours. We've been in business anyway, so I'm going to skip ahead, but instead of trying to get you to sign up for the membership, I might want to see if you want to take a tour or agree to a free 3-day trial of the gym. So I'm just trying to close you on progressing to the next step. So a totally different approach. Why I want to point that out is because think about the close. Think about the close. If I just talk to you about treadmills and then I say, are you ready to sign up? Versus if I talk to you about transforming your life and talk to you about relationships and stress and medical bills, and I share an example with you. Think about when it's time to close, how much easier it is to close with a better sales pitch. So that's what I want to point out there. Now, if you want more information on how to build your pitch, here's a slide to a link to a webinar that takes you through consultative selling and building your pitch. The next thing I want to talk about is qualifying the prospect. And as I mentioned, a lot of times why closing is hard is that you get to the end of the sales process and you have a bad prospect. Let me give you an example. So let's say that you sell cars, right? And you have someone who's looking at a car and they seem really interested and they love the car that you're showing them, and then you try to close them for the sale. And you didn't ask them a lot of questions about their current situation, right? Well, let's say hypothetically the person that's looking at the car, let's say hypothetically the car they currently have is 6 months old. Now, unless they're extremely rich or not the normal person, if someone has a car that's 6 months old, they're likely not to purchase a new car right now, right? So that question of what do you drive today and could give you a clue that they're not a good prospect. Maybe it's a man that's looking at the car, but it's really the wife that makes big ticket purchasing decisions. So, and it might be important for you to ask, who makes the decisions of purchasing cars and big ticket items in your household? And if he says it's my wife and she's not there, then it's not a good prospect. So that's an example of finding out details to qualify the prospect. And while those aren't closing questions, those can determine if the prospect is really someone that you can actually close. If you might ask questions like that, and it's a Sunday afternoon on a car lot, you might realize that this is not somebody I want to be rude to, the prospect, but it's not someone I want to spend the afternoon with because he's not a good prospect yet. Maybe he's just he's like a year or two away maybe. So you want to be there for him and ask him, answer his questions, but you maybe want to be able to take care of other prospects that might have an older vehicle and might be the decision maker. So that's an example of asking questions to qualify the prospect, and by qualifying, you're going to be in closing situations with better quality prospects. So I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because I have a webinar that you can watch that's specifically on qualifying. And I'll give you a link to that. But just to show you what I'm explaining, when regarding qualifying, there are 4 areas that I believe that you can qualify. So, do they need what you sell? Do they have the authority to buy it? Do they have the ability to buy it from a purchasing standpoint? So, if the man is a decision maker and he can say yes, but if he's unemployed, then he doesn't have the ability to purchase. So he may love your car that you're showing him, but he's just kicking tires. Do they have the intent to purchase? So again, I'll direct you to the webinar where this is in more detail, but the key to measuring how the prospect is in each of these areas is by asking questions. So what motivated you to come out? What are you doing today in this area? What's working well? So I would encourage you to download these slides, and then you'll have these questions. They're pretty self-explanatory, but these are questions to determine, does the prospect need what I sell? Does the prospect have the authority to purchase what I sell? Does the prospect have the ability to purchase? So is there a budget approved for this project? What's the range you're trying to stay within? Does the prospect have the intent to purchase? So there's a little bit more explanation probably regarding intent. It's not as self-explanatory, and that's fully explained in that webinar. So, but here are some questions. So just to show you an example, so a real simple product here, if I kind of put everything I just went through with you. So let's say that you're at a department store and you're a salesperson's showing you a refrigerator, right? So if he has the product pitch, he might say, well, here's our XYZ brand. You can see it's stainless steel. It has the 2 upright doors that open outward, and when he's talking to you about all that, that's the product pitch, right? He might say we have 24 months, no interest financing. Again, those are product details. And then he says, do you want to move forward, and do you want to purchase this? Is this what you're wanting to purchase today? And that's the close for the product. Now let's talk about if he uses the consultative pitch and qualifies the prospect. So that might look something like this. This unit is an energy saver design, so that can help to reduce your electric bills. Your refrigerator runs pretty much all day, so it can reduce your electric bill by as much as 10% a month. How much are you paying per month on electricity, right? So there you're getting into value. What I just went through there. That's an example of talking treadmills versus losing weight or becoming happier. By the way, what I would push you to do, if you watch more than one of our videos, you might get tired of me talking about the gym membership example, but I do believe it's easy for us to get our hands around. And what I would give you a trick. If you do connect with that example, I would say, when you're trying to figure out if your pitch is in the right direction, stop and think, am I talking about treadmills and a lap pool, or am I talking about losing weight, becoming healthier, decreasing stress? And try to figure out when with how you're describing your product and what you're saying, is which category is it in? Because if you're talking about treadmills, meaning you're talking about your product, then you're pushing your product. If you're talking about the what's going to happen and how you're going to help your prospect in terms of going back to the gym membership, losing weight, becoming happier, getting in a relationship, decreasing stress, then you're in a better direction, in my opinion. So what that would look like with this is, I already mentioned he's talking about the energy saving. This design helps you to see all of the food easier in your refrigerator, so less food will go bad. Food will not go bad as often because you'll be able to see what's in there. You'll be able to order better and manage your groceries better. Those are benefits. So now let's get to some questions. So what brought you out here today? What kind of refrigerator do you currently have? When did you buy it? Is it giving you any problems? Is there a budget that you're trying to stay within? Are you the person that makes decisions regarding appliances? Okay, so that's a totally different direction, right? And as you can see, that's positioning the salesperson to close much easier. Here is the webinar on qualifying prospects, so you can get that in the slides. By the way, so now we're going to talk about closing. And I just want to point out the two past sections that we talked about were not closing. And the next section, dealing with objections, is not really closing either. The majority of this presentation is actually not really closing. We're going to talk about closing now, but you can see if you kind of divided this up into 4 pieces of of tips, 3 of the 4 are not closing. That's a good example of what I'm trying to explain to you, that to be a better closer is about doing everything else right, and then closing should just kind of take care of itself if you're doing that. Now, if you don't do the other things, then that's where you really have to be pushy and persuasive, sometimes manipulative. Just want to point that out. Now I'll give you really key things to do when you're in that closing situation. So first of all, there's a concept called trial closing, and what this is asking. By the way, a lot of what I'm talking about here today, if you really take one thing away from this, a lot of what I'm talking about here today is asking questions. Whether you are closing or you're doing the other stuff like qualifying or delivering your sales pitch, or what I'm going to talk about next with dealing with objections, a lot of what I'm talking to you about doing is asking certain questions. So some questions that you can ask are called trial closing questions. These are questions that check in with the prospect to see if you're going in the right direction, to see what they're feeling, what they're thinking. So you can ask trial closing questions every step of the way. So if you're in your first conversation with a prospect, what do you think about what we've discussed so far? How would this feature help you? So is this something that you could see your employees using? Are we heading in the right direction? So what these questions do, these don't basically say, are you ready to purchase? These are checking the temperature of the prospect. And these are very important because you might be going and delivering your sales pitch and talking about all these different things, and maybe you're not going in the right direction at all. The prospect. Let me give you one example. So you might show up and be delivering a presentation, and your prospect, there was some miscommunication, and your presentation is on a totally different thing than what the prospect was wanting to see. If you don't stop and say, is this what you were expecting to see today? Does this match up with your expectations with what we're going to do here today? Are we going in the right direction? If you don't check in with your prospect, you might just continue and power through down this wrong direction, waste all this time. So the more you check in, the more you know you're going in the right direction, and trial closing can help you to do that. By the way, so some of these next ones, I don't do a whole lot. These are really kind of like a little pushy closing techniques. I'm going to give these to you, and maybe you like them, but anyways. So the assumptive close is basically asking a question assuming the prospect would like to move forward. So what time would you like us to put you down for a free consultation? Going back to the refrigerator salesperson, this would be him saying, so what do you want this in stainless steel or do you want this in jet black? When he's showing you the refrigerator, assuming that he's asking that question in a way that he's assuming that you're wanting to move forward. So it's the assumptive close. The alternative close is basically kind of assuming and giving 2 options. So we have workshops available on Monday afternoon and Thursday morning. Which one would you prefer I sign you up for? So you're giving 2 options there. Let the prospect lead. I probably lean more in this direction. So letting the prospect lead, you could kind of look at this as the soft close, is asking questions like, well, what would you like to do next? What direction would you like to go in? Do you want to continue to talk about this? When would you like to talk again? So here, I want to point out, you have to do the other things correctly in order to have a soft close. The reason why is because let's just say you deliver a product pitch, right? You're talking about the product. Let's say you don't do a good job of building interest, qualifying, um, discussing pain points, then there's a good chance if you say, well, what would you like to do next, that the prospect might say, I'm good, I'll get back with you. This works well when you've done everything right. You've communicated benefits, you've qualified them, you've identified that they fit well with how your product can help them. You've communicated how you differ from other competitors. You've shared some examples. You've talked about how your company is better than the other competitors. You've really checked all these boxes. You've built rapport, and you've trial closed them also along the way by checking in with them. Is this what you're looking for? Does this match up with what you want? And so then, when it's all done and you have nothing left to say or do, you can put the ball in their court and say, so you tell me, what direction do you want to go from here? So it's a really powerful place to be, and it just displays a lot of confidence and whatnot. You could turn questions into statements. So instead of saying, would you like to meet next week, saying, we should meet next week. So, this is a good way to demonstrate this tactic is in social situations. So let's say you're either with friends, or you're planning a date, or you're with someone that you have a personal relationship with. Instead of saying, well, what do you want to eat? Or what are you in the mood for? Or would you like to go to this place? Do you want to go do this? Where you're asking a question where you're making that other person decide and to try to figure out what they want or how they feel. Instead of saying, do you want to go have Chinese food, right? You can turn that question. I mean, obviously, if you're asking that question, you want to go have Chinese food, or you're making that as a suggestion, right? So you can turn that question into a statement to say, let's go have Chinese food. And that change, you're basically changing a question mark to a period, right? And delivering it in a confident, persuasive way can have an impact on getting agreement. And so you can apply that to sales by saying, instead of right here, do you want to meet? Do you want to meet next week for about 20 to 30 minutes for a demonstration? You could say, hey, you know what? Let's meet next week. Let's put 30 minutes on the calendar, and I'll show you a demonstration. So those are two totally different things. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of what we're talking about here today is all about asking questions. And by the way, I haven't said it here today, but I usually say it in just about every other training we do. The best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions, and that should be clear in this presentation, because that's more than half of what we're talking about is asking good questions. So certainly we have some hard closing questions we'll give you. Are you ready to move forward in the next step? What would you like? What would you need to be able to make a commitment to move forward? If you had everything you want, are you prepared to move forward? I like that one. If you have everything you want, are you prepared to move forward? And there's some other versions of that. Like sometimes, prospects ask us all the time about, a certain feature, right? Like, does it do this or does it do that, and or whatnot about our system. And so sometimes I'll go back to them and I'll say, well, if it did that, or if we could get it to do that, are you ready to move forward? Because a lot of times people ask for stuff, and I don't know why they'll ask for stuff even if that doesn't really impact them moving forward. So push back on them and say, well, if I give you that, are you ready to commit to moving forward? So you can read through these again. I'd encourage you to download these slides. But these questions are pretty self-explanatory, but these are questions you can ask at the end of your sales process. Here's a tool that you can use, and it's called an evaluation plan, but whether or not you call it an evaluation plan, it's basically a list of steps that you and the prospect will go through together. And you could think of it as, this is what I used in my career, where I sold complex items that had a lot of steps, like during the sales process, and then after the sale and like go live, picture software technical implementations, but you could apply this concept even if what you sell is a little bit more straightforward. But think of this as a list of steps that you and the prospect will take together, right? And it can either be before the sale or after the sale or whatever. But ideally, it includes. This is about closing, right? So this is something this would be a tool you would use before you close the deal. And what it basically is let's say we're meeting and we're reviewing a proposal, or I'm delivering a presentation, and I present this plan to you, so that if we agree to move forward, continue to move forward together, these are the steps we're going to go through, and with each date and the owner and what we're going to go through, and you get the prospect to agree to those. Do you agree with that? You're wanting to move forward with this list? I mean, obviously the purchase is not the next step. So I'm not asking if you're agreeing to purchase today, but are you agreeing to move forward with these steps? Are you agreeing at least to move to the next step, right? That which would be like the first thing on the list. And they say yes. Okay, we agree to keep moving forward. Okay, so do you agree with this list? That this list are the things that need to be done. Is there anything we're missing? And so you might finish this list, correct the list together with the prospect. Are the dates realistic? Do the dates match up with the timeline that you need? Are the dates dates that you can agree to? I mean, I'm not holding you to this as a contract, but this would be our project plan moving forward. And you get their agreement and their buy-in. And then what you can do is you can use this evaluation plan throughout the remainder of the sales process. One way that you might do that is when you check back in with a prospect and you say, well, you're trying to get maybe the prospect has gone quiet on you or not been responsive. You can go back to them and say, I don't know if something's changed on your side, but if you are still wanting to purchase from us and you want to have the implementation done by the end of the year, then according to our plan that we agreed to, we need to complete the step that I'm calling about today by the end of this month. So either we need to adjust the plan, or let me know if you're not wanting to continue to, or if you're able to move either we need to change the plan and move the date out, or maybe something's changed and we're not moving forward with the plan at all. So you let me know. I'm just worried about the plan. So this becomes like the thing you're worried about and you're managing to, and you've already agreed to the plan with them. So it gives you it helps you to get the prospect accountable to certain steps and to being responsive to you ahead of them actually signing the deal. A compelling event, and a compelling event could also be part of the plan that I just mentioned, but a compelling event is a date of significance, okay? And a good way to explain this is, one way that I used this in my career was, if you think about a piece of software or a contract expiring, think about a contract expiring and your proposal is for a new contract, and there can't be any time in between, right? So if the contract expires at the end of the year and your proposal has to start on January 1, right? The customer can't have no contract in place for a month or any days. So that's a compelling event. And so an example of a compelling events is contracts expiring, maybe a site is opening. Let's say someone's opening up a restaurant on the 4th of July, right? So, which is a horrible day to open a restaurant, but that's the first thing that came in my mind. But that's a compelling event. Let's say you sell them furniture for the restaurant. That date is an event. So site opening or moving, a system being discontinued. So those are compelling events, and if those are tied to what you sell, then you can use that date to help you to close. Maybe it might not be the difference between you getting the prospect to say yes and no, but sometimes when you're managing the sales process, your prospect might become unresponsive, or push back on you, and call me back at a certain date or whatever. So this is something you can use control that and control the sales process and drive the prospect back to either talking or agreeing to move forward. Now, if you don't have any type of like date that's really significant like that, you can manufacture a compelling event, such as creating a discount or promotion, or maybe the product is on limited availability. One closing tactic that you can do is the sales takeaway, and this is a little complex. There's also one of our webinars on using this tactic. It's a whole conversation itself, but it's basically the sales takeaway to disqualify. So there are certain times where your prospect might be on the fence and you can't get them to move forward. You can't get them to say yes, but they're also not saying no, and you might kind of try to take away from them. And so that might be by saying, hey, maybe this isn't the right direction for you, or it sounds like you all are doing pretty good, so maybe you don't need this. It does not seem like this is something that you are really interested in. So that you're taking it away. Now there's certain times when you want to do that, which is why I would encourage you to watch our webinar on the takeaway and disqualifying, but you don't want to do that when someone's expressing interest. Like if someone says, send me a quote, then you don't want to say, well, maybe this isn't the right direction for you. You send them the quote. You do this when they're not moving and they're idle and they're on the fence. So some common. Oh wait, no. So the next section here is dealing with objections, and as I mentioned, when you're not able to close, you're often getting some objections. So first thing I want to talk about is, I often show this slide, but there are some main steps that you often go through, and we call these early sales process steps. So the first time you talk to someone, initial contact, that might be a cold call, you're talking to someone at an event, email, then you might drive them to really talking for the first time. We call that a first conversation or an appointment. Could be over the phone, could be in person. And then you might drive them from the first conversation to a real meeting. That could be a presentation, a demonstration, might be just simply a proposal. But these are the steps that you often go through, regardless of what you sell. And the reason why I bring this up is because when you close, a lot of times you might be closing for the wrong thing, and when you get an objection, well, let me stop there. When you close for the wrong thing, so you could be in the first box here and be closing for the product, right? Remember, let's go back to the gym membership. Let's say that you walk into a gym, someone talks to you for 5 minutes, and they ask you if you want to sign up. Well, the next step of the process might be, let's go take a walk around the gym. So the close is to take a walk around the gym, and so what the first mistake you might do is close for the product, the sale, versus closing for the next step. So that's one thing here. Now, when you get the objection of I'm not interested, let's say that you say, well, you're telling them about the gym, and you say, well, let's take a quick walk around the gym and talk a little bit more. I want to get to know a little bit more about you. And they say, I'm not interested. Well, they're saying I'm not interested about signing up for the gym, most likely. They're not saying that objection is not about the next step. So in order to close better, two things here. One is close for the next step in the sales process. And two, when you get objections, realize that you drive them to the next step, not to trying to respond to the objection, even as though you're responding to an objection to the close. I know that doesn't make sense the way I just explained it, so let me show you real examples. So a common objection is I'm not interested, right? So you're trying to close and they tell you I'm not interested. Well, one thing you can do is deflect that objection back to your pre-qualifying questions. Hey, I understand. If I could ask you real quick, how do you feel about the current design and layout of your website? So ask them a question. Then they might answer your question and you've gone away from I'm not interested. You could also deflect back to pain points. So I'm not interested. Hey, I understand. Hey, sometimes when I talk with other business owners, we notice they often have challenges with that the website isn't really converting at the rate it should be. So those are two different ways to respond to I'm not interested. Now, just send me some information. You could deflect to your pre-qualifying questions. Hey, and this is exactly the same. It's the exact same response I just showed you. So whether they say I'm not interested or just send me some information, deflect and keep the conversation going back to your pre-qualifying questions. And so what if I connect this with closing? Basically, you could say, hey, are you interested in scheduling an appointment next week where we can blah blah blah? And they say, oh, I'm not interested, or just send me your information. Instead of saying, oh, instead of trying to make that person interested, ask them some of your questions. Now, sometimes when they say just send me your information, it's because they don't. Maybe you've asked them all of your questions already, and you could say something like, "Sure, I definitely can. Actually, there's a lot of information I can send over to you. If you have some questions about anything, it would be easier just to have a quick conversation." So, a way to respond to that there. By the way, I'm going to move through these pretty quickly due to time. I have a whole webinar on dealing with objections and these objections in particular. I'm moving through these quickly, and I'll show you a slide and a link to where you can watch the full demo on dealing with objections. We already use someone for that. So certainly when you're closing, someone might say, well, we already use someone for that. Well, ask them questions about their current provider. Ask them questions about looking for pain points. Ask them, confirm with them, share some pain points with them that you help to fix, and ask them if they have any of those. We're not looking at making any changes right now. Again, ask them some of your pre-qualifying questions. Share some common pain points. If you haven't figured it out yet, these objections are different, but the responses are all exactly the same. And what that means to you is, if you know the responses, you only need to know 2 or 3 different objection responses, and you can use them in a lot of different situations. We're not looking at making any changes right now. So this is to deflect to the sales process. So the way you might be able to respond to that when you're trying to close is, hey, I understand, and I want you to know I'm reaching out to you not to try to get you to sign up to anything or to sell you anything. I'm just trying to open the dialogue between our two companies and start an initial conversation. We'd really just like to learn a little bit more about you and share some information about us. That way, when you're ready to take a look at this closer or make a change, you can know who we are and how we can help. I don't have any budget to spend. Same response. You can ask with you can respond with some questions. You can respond with some pain points. You can again deflect to the sales process. So this is similar to what I just shared about not making any changes, but there's a slight spin on this at the end, which is we're just trying to open the dialogue, share some information about us, see and whatnot. That way, when your budget planning opens up, and you can know who we are and how we can help. Call me back in X months. Sure, I can certainly do that, but if I could ask you real quick, and you ask them a question. Call me back in X months. I can certainly do that, although sometimes I deal with businesses and they often have these challenges. Are you saying you aren't concerned today about any of those? Call me back in X months, so you could deflect to your sales process. I can certainly do that, but I want you to know I already went through this. Again, it's the same response. So again, I showed you the sales process, which had the initial contact, and then the first conversation, and then the presentation. Those are the 3 steps. Now, what I just went through with you just now, those objection responses, are primarily for the initial contact, right? You're just trying to start the conversation. But when you're in the appointment and you're actually, have some time with the prospect, or if you're, delivering a presentation, that's when you might get some objections that you might need to, you don't really just want to deflect around and keep the conversation going. You, like, let's say, for example, you sell something. Sometimes you do want to try to deal with the objections and overcome them. And so some ways that you can do that is try to get to the root of the concern. Try to do budget displacement, which is if they say we don't have any money to spend, try to move funds from, try to make it sort of budget neutral, where you're either moving your product is going to decrease a cost in a certain area, or you're going to move budget from a certain area. Focus on the return on investment of your product. and whatnot. So again, these overcome attempts are discussed more in this webinar, Sales Objection Rebuttals, that deal with diffuse common sales objections and whatnot. So that's pretty much it. I hope, just to kind of summarize, so you can see there, a lot of what we talked about will help make closing easier. Most of what we talked about actually has nothing to, or it's not directly closing. It's what you do before you get in the closing situation, or when you've tried to close and you get an objection, it's dealing with the objection. So I hope that helps make things easier for you. I would like to ask you a favor. If this webinar has helped you in some sort of way, maybe you're watching this on YouTube, what we would ask is, if you found at least one thing of value, a nugget that you can take with you, you can return the value, the favor to us by liking, sharing, commenting on this video. It helps us tremendously. If you want more help from us, what I've just shared with you is part of what we call the SMART sales system. So SMART stands for sales messaging and response tactics. As you can see, everything we're talking about here today, it deals with your sales message, what you say. We're one of the only companies out there that really teaches salespeople what to say in all of the different situations that come up. I've been through lots of different training programs, and most of them don't really tell you exactly what to say. So that's our charter. We believe that we will make you a smart salesperson by teaching you what to say and helping you with how to respond in terms of and respond tactics. So a lot of what we talked about here today, like for example, we talked about objection responses, right? So you know you're going to face objections, and you know you're going to ask questions, and your prospect's going to give you some sort of answer. So how do you respond to those? So by working on all that and giving you clarity on what to do, will make you smarter. And by being smarter, you'll make a better impression, you'll generate more leads, you'll build more rapport, you'll get less rejection, your job will be easier. We call this the SMART sales system because it's actually something that you can implement. I don't know how many sales books I've read or trainings I've gone to where it might have been good stuff, but then it's just not something that you can implement. Maybe it's taught to you in a way that the person, you would have had to copy the sales trainer's personality in order to do what they were recommending that you do. Ours is an actual system that you can implement regardless of your experience or personality and sales skills. So there's two parts to our system. So one part is methodology. So this is a process. What you've seen here today is part of our methodology. You can see at the bottom of this list is closing. So you just were exposed to the last module on this list, but there's also modules for, and I've shown you slides to them, objections, sales messaging, sales process. So you can access our methodology through our books, training videos, coaching, and consulting. And so a lot of our customers are salespeople that work with us to become smarter. We also work with sales managers that work with us, and they use us to help train their salespeople. So the other piece to our sales system is a software platform. And the reason why we give away a lot of our methodology for free, which by the way you can access on YouTube for free, is because our software platform completely aligns with our methodology. So if you love our methodology and you start using our methodology, you probably should check out our software platform, and you'll probably love the software because it'll help you to do everything that we're teaching you to do and whatnot. So the SMART sales system is $49 per user per month. You do get a 40% discount if you sign up for the year. The reason why we give such a large discount for the year is that we have two types of customers. Our software actually creates sales scripts. It's one of the things that it does. And a lot of our customers just come to us to create their sales script. And so they might use us for a month or two, and then they cancel. And you can certainly do that. There's tons of reasons why you'd want to use our software as your ongoing as one of your sales prospecting tools. And we can certainly do, and so if you use our software in that way, we want you to have a lower price. So the 40% discount gets you under $30 per month. Sales training is all on YouTube at no cost. We do provide a service called a scripter walkthrough. Our software will help you to create your sales pitch. You know how I showed you the slide where I talked about the gym membership, and instead of talking about treadmills, I want you talking about changing your life and doing all these great things. So the software helps you to get over there and to create that message for yourself. And it takes you through a workflow of steps. Now you can do that you could go through our software on your own and build that. It's what it's designed for, actually, is to do it on your own. But certainly you could hire us to go through it with you. I'm the one who actually does those, so you would purchase 2 hours of consulting for $200, and we'll go through and create your pitch together. It's extremely productive, not only because I know the software inside and out, I'm the one who created it, but I also help you to think about your business and to think of new benefits and to think. We always come up with great benefits and pain points and questions. Two brains is better than one, and I'm pretty good. If I do say so myself, if only because I've just gone through this process so many times, I'm pretty good at coming up with good things that you should be saying. So if you look at it that way, 1 month subscription and the walkthrough for $250, you basically get a library of documents basically created by me, which if you don't follow us, that might mean nothing to you, but most of our customers end up watching a lot of our videos, and if you watch a lot of our videos, then you might have some appreciation for my approach. And so for me to basically create a library of documents for you for only $250, it's a pretty good deal. Here's my direct email if you have any questions, and I will see if there are any questions on